Liar.
Everywhere.
On netrootsradio.com.
David Waldman.
Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. Time for another show. It's been another evening. It was before. Now it's morning. That's the name of the show, Kagro in the morning. If it was Kagro in the evening, we could just say, hey, welcome. Well, we would have said yesterday. This is terrible, actually. This show is awful. Turn it off. Go back and listen to the regular news. They won't tell you very much, but at least they'll have their act together. They write the scripts beforehand. I think that's cheating. It's rigged. It's rigged in their favor. It's another day after an evening at the Democratic National Convention, and the production staff has winnowed here at Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters with a little bit of business travel going on, and so therefore a little bit easier, or I guess a little bit less to get in the way of sitting down, giving up, surrendering in life, and saying, I will turn on the Democratic National Convention. Again, to deliver this, speechify this, we're going to make this convention. I will turn on the Democratic Convention on the television. You know, folks, I like to press the buttons on the remote control. I press the buttons here. The channel changes there. But you know, we all like to watch television. I don't know. Just trying to speechify. I had some laundry to fold, for one thing, and there was no one around to say things like, oh my God, I can't believe you've turned on the Democratic Convention, or please don't turn on the Democratic Convention, I'll jump out the window if you do, or something like that. And although really, honestly, the speeches have been good, so I don't know that I would get that many complaints. But on the other hand, there's so many other fun, entertaining things that will take your mind off of everything else that's going on in the world that usually makes it onto the TV first. And then it's a question of, hey, you changed the channel on me and I was watching that. If you start out watching the Democratic Convention, well, things can happen. So I had some household chores to take care of. I saw a little bit of Michelle Obama, not the whole thing, because there was a movie on the other channel and I flipped back and forth. But I saw a good deal of it. I saw Barack Obama. Let me be clear, I saw both Obamas, right? So we did see that. That was an interesting lineup. You don't get them both in one night usually. And that was apparently part of his opening as well. Hey, I don't know. What did he say? I'm the only person stupid enough to follow Michelle. That's pretty true. Being hailed as a, barn burner of a speech, one of the best ever, perhaps, and even compared to Barack Obama's own breakout speech of 2004, about which I remember next to nothing. So, okay. But still, in the moment, it was just terrific. Doug Emhoff gave a speech, very endearing. And, I don't know. Everybody was on the screen yesterday, and everybody who I saw in the evening, 8:30, 8:45 on, I thought, handled everything beautifully. The roll call of the states was still on when I turned it on. Of course, as a procedure person, you have to point out, well, the roll call of the states was already taken. We had to do a virtual roll call ahead of time. Remember, because Republicans in various states were insisting that the laws that they've waived for decades for both parties about getting your ballot entries finalized before a certain date, but usually the conventions are being held later and later, and they usually just waive that requirement because they know who the nominee is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Or we're saying, no, this time we won't. This time we're going to be sticklers for the rules. And by the way, if you try to apply the rules to us, we're going to either ignore or overturn the rules legislatively, or with a hand-picked judge in a district where we can't get anybody else, right? This sort of thing. Anyway, they threatened that, so they held the roll call early. And then yesterday was just, hey, people like this part of the show, and we like to give the delegates a chance to cheer for their states and say fun facts about their states. And I guess the fact that there was no suspense involved, I think they kind of let people get carried away with, and I love it when they do, and they speak about their state. Sometimes, people hold on to the microphone a little bit too long. You get an important personage from that state, and they tend to speechify a little bit. They could go, for instance, as long as 2 hours, and no one would stop them. And you know how horrific that could be. But I love the roll call of the states. I tuned in late, but I saw a lot of it. I loved the way it was done. The music, they had the DJ there. Each state had their own walk-on music. It was really terrific. I mean, it was as much like a sporting event, cultural event as a political convention. And I thought it fit the mood beautifully, and so great. The fact checkers are back at it, and that has people annoyed. That one's, I don't know how we can fix that one, although there are precedents, natural precedents, not natural necessarily, but usable and useful and in use, precedents that we, I guess, could analogize. I don't know exactly how you'd arrange this sort of thing, but it seems to me, I concede that the press feels like, well, if we fact check the Republican convention speeches, then we've got to fact check the Democratic convention speeches. And that part, I don't think anybody really disputes that. The dispute arises when you decide what to do when one convention's speeches is filled with really despicable whoppers of lies. Democrats want to allow you to abort babies even after birth. Well, how do you should be fact checking that versus, I think I have 10 minutes left on the meter. Well, fact check, you have 6. Are they the same? No. And I know it's difficult, and they are facts, and you check them, etc., but they're really digging to try to come up with things to point to in the Democratic speeches. Sometimes it's a little easier, I don't know. But it seems to me we watch all the time as people go on trial in criminal court, in civil court. I may be held liable for this thing, or I may be found guilty of this thing. And what might you be found guilty of? Perhaps a misdemeanor, perhaps a capital crime. We differentiate in these things. And if you're applying for a job, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Yes, I was on the Group W bench, for littering versus I'm a drug dealer. I'm a drug dealer right now. That would be a bigger problem, I think. But we differentiate. There are gradations, and it doesn't seem like they're willing to acknowledge that sort of stuff. Although I guess they have Pinocchios, but you can have 1 through 5. Maybe that's just not enough. Or maybe you need another character for stuff that's like, well, did Donald Trump say you should do inappropriate things with disinfectant? Yes. Did he say bleach? Nah. Well, he didn't say that's what you should use in your lungs. But I mean, is that really a fact check? That's just a reminder. She didn't say she could see Russia from her house. Okay. Well, I can see from my house that Greg Dworkin is here. You can hear it, actually, from your house as well. Greg, good morning. How are you? How'd you like the show?
Good morning. This may be one of the days where the leaf blowers are outside my window. And that
was mentioned in the speech yesterday.
By Barack Obama.
Listen, so he's been listening to the show. Hi, Barack. How are you?
Wired the soundboard for you. I've been coming up with clips to play.
Yeah, I know.
Annoying to you because you never know in advance. You don't have a chance to.
Well, a little bit. A little in advance. You gave me some warning. I saw it as the pre-show music was rolling that you had noted something. All right. So
I only have one.
I think I put it in pocket already, so I guess I'm about ready to go. You want to actually roll it and talk about it, or am I?
Well, let me tell you what it is.
Do I need 5 minutes? Okay.
Okay, so you were talking about the roll call. And the roll call is just the best part of the convention. The speeches are great, but everything is predetermined.
That's my favorite.
But the roll call, the way the Democrats have done it, ever since the virtual roll call and the calamari guy from Rhode Island.
That was awesome.
It's always awesome. You used to do it just to see what the hell are they wearing.
Yeah, funny hats.
Straw voters and lobster hats and, whatever. And
I saw some cheese heads yesterday.
Or corn or cheese heads like they did yesterday.
They had that, yeah. They never stopped the cheese head.
They never stopped that. But now it's gotten much better, and it's much more like a show.
Yes.
And they've taken the best of wrestling.
See.
And, the best of the NFL pregame, and let's get these guys on the field through the smoke-filled, loud music and such. And what you're about to hear is Morning Joe did a small clip where they were contrasting the Republican National Convention, RNC, with the Democratic National Convention, roll call. And they picked 3 or 4 states. So you have the Republican version of that state and the Democratic version of that state.
What are people like in that state? Okay.
And so that's what I want you to play. And then maybe we'll stop it and tell you a little bit about it, but just go ahead and play it.
Okay, so that's this thing here. Let's see. Morning, Joe.
Delegates and alternates. Let us commence with the call of the roll of the states.
That would be the Republicans.
Are you ready? Let me hear you.
Wow, I'm going to turn it down.
There's the difference between.
Yeah, all right. So right out of that, the person chairing the roll call is kind of like, all right, well, I'm sure she's a nice lady.
I'm sure she's a nice lady, but okay, keep going.
Yeah, a little bit of, all right.
First is Iowa.
Iowa, 40 delegates.
Iowa, are you awake?
Iowa, you ready?
Iowa.
Hello.
Oh, hey, here's Iowa at the Democratic Convention. This is a great way to fill the silence. You can't beat it.
Georgia.
Now, Little John is going to do Georgia for the Democrats. And
59 delegates.
Also, just appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, all right. Here comes Georgia. Also, do not adjust your screen. All those people are white. Here we go. All right. Oh, I've got the pause on. Here we go. Oh, here's Georgia.
This is Georgia.
Yeah. This, by the way, if you didn't watch live, I mean, I didn't, but I did see this clip. That's not the DJ playing the music. That's the performer.
That's Little John, the performer, who's also a delegate, who was also a candidate on The Apprentice.
Everything remember that. Well, they did a really great job booking their celebrities. But I mean,
keep going a little more.
I like that too. Turn out for all right. I hate to interrupt. That was good. That was good music.
Hey, turn out for what?
West Virginia, 32 votes. President Donald J. Trump.
Yay.
Party people, come on. TNC, party people, come on. Roll call, party
That's
people,
the
come on.
Yeah.
TNC, party people, come on.
Thank you, delegates.
Thank you.
It's time for us to do the right thing, and
That's,
that is
Gavin
to
Newsom,
elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States of America.
A tale of...
Okay, well, that will illustrate the difference for you. I mean, that's just good showmanship. And you thought that, oh well, Donald Trump, he understands television, but he doesn't understand conventions, I don't think. And I think he thought someone else was gonna, do that stuff, maybe. But that's the big difference. I mean, you fill the gaps with some music, you keep the hype up, and I don't know, Republicans are just not interested in working on it. Low energy.
There's a little bit more here, but basically they're explaining about what's going on here. But you get the gist of it.
Yeah.
And so it was a party.
Yeah.
And the way they then did it is because this was a ceremonial roll call, as you point out.
Yes.
It was done in Chicago.
Yes.
So there were 20,000 people there.
That seems like a good idea.
Simultaneously, in Milwaukee, Kamala and Coach Waltz were at a Milwaukee rally with 18,000 people.
Ah.
So they were filling 2 arenas simultaneously, and they timed it perfectly, and it went without a hitch. That as they got to the end of the roll call saying, we've already done this, but just so you know, Kamala Harris is officially our nominee. And right at that point, she walks out in Milwaukee after they just said that in Chicago.
Yeah.
Turns to the camera and says, "Thank you, Chicago. We graciously accept, I just want you in Milwaukee to know, over there in Chicago," I guess they had it on the screen, they just nominated me.
Yeah. I mean, it was well coordinated.
It was filled to the brim. The people who were in Milwaukee said it was absolutely fantastic, beautiful show. So you had the, here we go with the nomination. It's Donald J. Trump. and then you had this excitement
Trump himself
in two separate cities.
Yeah.
And it was just absolutely fantastic. And then we got to the good speeches.
Yeah, it was well done, well coordinated. They very often, lately, I mean, the usual tradition is, right, you nominate the person, but the nominee is somewhere else, usually, often doing a campaign stop. And in the age of video and then later satellite hookups, etc., and high-speed internet and whatnot, they got around to doing, well, it's kind of anticlimactic. You nominate the person, you kind of want them to come bounding out and accept, but they always say, well, you'll hear from them on Thursday. But of late, they've injected either pre-taped speeches or satellite hookups to the nominee in an office somewhere saying, hello, I'll see you Thursday. Thank you so much.
Usually their hotel room.
But
somewhere.
yeah, right. But and that's about it. But not I'm at another
Nothing
party.
Like this was just like all show. It was great.
Yeah, well done. And
great party. And they were celebrating and they were enjoying themselves. And then
yes,
Doug Emhoff comes in and says, I'm a real regular person. Let me tell you about my wife and how she became Mamala. And I have to tell you, my mother is the only person in the world who thinks she was lucky to marry me. I mean, it's just perfect. And
yeah,
he's just, cuddly and wonderful. And it turns out, he's divorced, but his ex-wife is the one that produced a video introducing him.
Oh.
And she had a huge sign, she was there, pro Kamala. And on Twitter, somebody said something along the lines of, she was there and she produced the video. And she is like Kamala's biggest supporter. And then she herself tweets, you're damn right.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
my point is contrast this.
Someone needed to take him off
with Trump and not only his exes, but his currents.
That's
There's
true.
no family support there. Except for the people he hired.
Yeah. And in some cases, some of these exes were hired, it seems.
Yeah,
like.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, at least they all get a place on the golf course when it's all over.
Right. So Doug's was good. And there were some other, there's some rising stars again. Angela Alsobrooks is another rising star. She's not in there yet, but she'll be elected. She's running against Larry Hogan, I think, in Maryland. But if I got that right, you need a scorecard to keep all the players straight these days.
Yeah.
And then they get into Michelle and Barack, and we can spend the whole show talking about them.
All right.
But they were good.
Yeah.
They were like really good. They were like first class. I've never seen anything this good. And, Michelle is better than Barack, and Barack was just outstanding.
By all accounts, yes.
And why was Michelle so good? She's not a politician. She hates doing this. Everybody in the world knows it. Everybody in the world knows the only reason she's up there is because she feels like she has to. We all get that. We've all done stuff we don't want to, but we feel like we have to.
Yeah, yes.
I'm sure you've had shows where you say, I don't really feel like doing this today. But you got,
a lot of days.
I got to do it.
Yeah. But I want to talk to everybody. All right.
Well, but we're all like that. We all have to do that.
I want to do it at 9:30.
Yeah, exactly. For us introverts, to get up there and talk to people, it's like hard.
Yes.
You don't necessarily always want to, but
that's why I keep the audience.
And she's like that. And she gets up there and she just knocks it out of the ballpark. You remember the very, very famous one, when they go low, we go high. And as somebody pointed out on Twitter, well, we're going high. We're going right straight to the jugular.
Okay. Yeah.
And she just absolutely eviscerated Trump. And, I get sick and tired of being sick and tired. I get sick and tired of seeing stuff and look how somebody destroyed this person or that person. And you look and you say, okay, fine, they said something. No, this was destruction.
All right. Well, I appreciated it. And that's true. That's a pet peeve of mine. You get absolutely eviscerated. Hey, that guy's not doing a very good job. Okay. Snorefest. Even if it's, worse than, well, he's convicted. He's a convicted felon. I know.
So she starts talking about Trump. She said, and this is my favorite line, the one thing I pulled. Again, I'm not going to make you play the clip. It's important. But the line is, she understands that most of us will never be afforded, she, Kamala Harris, understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward.
Oh, yes.
We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth.
Yeah, that was a big one.
And then she goes on to say the ability to fail 3 or 4 times,
Yes, I did catch that.
And then she says,
live, and I love it.
He's got all of these advantages. Maybe what we're saying here is that, he won't get a chance to do that black job.
Yeah. It turns out there's quite a lot of them. And a lot of people.
Angel Reese, the breakout star from the WNBA, along with Caitlin Clark's class, Angel Reese tweets, Michelle is saying words in capital letters.
Well, fact check. That's true.
True.
Yeah, I think we have to give it to her on that one. Although it's really her vocal cords and air passing through and
right. And again, so part of what I want to talk about, Barack and Michelle were wonderful. And we're fired up and ready to go. And the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats are stark.
Mm-hmm. Stark.
But they
raving.
brought fun back to it. They brought the sense that this is both important and we have work to do, but at the same time, you should have fun doing it. And you have to look and see where the hope is. And you talk to people, especially younger people. There was one really interesting comment that somebody made who's like 20-something and said, y'all old people have to understand, we never felt the excitement of Barack Obama in 2008. You keep talking about that. That was before my time.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
And I'm thinking, oh, my God, I'm old. But, I'm also thinking they're right. And now they get a chance to feel that hope, and they're going to like it.
Yeah. There's a lot of work going on that front, actually. I think I saw, probably Philip Bump, I think, might have written the piece. I haven't read it, and I didn't put it aside because I know this, and I think most people know this. But he was just sort of ruminating about this situation and saying, there are new and not so new voters for whom Donald Trump has always been a politician. They're vaguely aware of his prior career, but they may have heard good things, maybe heard bad things. Yeah. It's interesting. So he's like, well, by the way, so before he was in politics, he was kind of a scumbag, and here's why. Oh,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how many people don't know that, and he's, no longer primarily known for that.
Central Park 5, New York. So
yeah, I mean,
he was always a scumbag, and everybody hated him in New York. Always.
Yeah. I mean, he was always a clown, certainly at minimum. So, yeah, good speeches, good stuff. Well done. Kept the energy up. I did love that line. I did happen to see that one actually be delivered from Michelle Obama about essentially saying, look, we don't have the luxury of, if you bankrupt the business, you're done. For most people, right? Bankrupt 6 casinos. Yeah. Like, there's no coming back from that.
People who look like me don't get a 4th chance.
Yeah. Right. And you can't just say, well, I'll just try another bank. No, all the banks say no. I'll try bank from another country. I'll stop using banks. I'll just use Russian oligarchs. That doesn't happen.
Right. Exactly right.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw this in before the break just because if I don't, I'm going to forget to say it.
Yes.
But there was a new poll yesterday out from Nebraska, from the Omaha area, Nebraska 2. That one extra electoral vote we need to get to 270. A conservative pollster, which I think was Remington, found VP Kamala Harris, MVP Kamala Harris, leading former President Donald Trump 50-42 in blood red Nebraska's swing 2nd district. This matters because the stray electoral college vote is up for grabs.
Yes.
So again, a lot of work to do. And this illustrates 50-42. That's actually not close.
No.
But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the result.
Right.
But if that reflects results everywhere,
come on.
This race won't be close. But if you're looking at the polls right now, the polls say it will be close. So which one is correct? We don't know.
Well, both of them. I mean, nationally, certainly it could be close. And you find out that the 2nd district in Nebraska, it's not close in that district.
But that's the funny thing. It used to be not so long ago, like recent enough so I can remember, that the Democrats had to win by 4, 5, 6 points.
Yes.
In order to get that electoral college advantage away from the Republicans. That's no longer true.
Oh,
when we're looking at what's essentially a 3 or 4 point Harris race, maybe call it 3 points, 3.5 points nationally, that's enough to give her a tie or a 1 point lead in all of the swing states that she needs.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the difference between the national vote and the electoral college vote has shrunk. Well, the electoral college advantage isn't there that much anymore.
That is good news because it was a bit of a disaster.
It was always a bit of a downer, but, don't worry about that. So now you can look at the national polls and say, what? If she's up by 6, she wins. If she's up by 5, she wins. If she's up by 3.5, she may win by 50 votes in each one of those swing states.
Good, I'll take it. And I'm looking forward to it. I should point out, by the way, you did mention it yesterday and again today, that stray electoral vote. Nebraska is one of, what do we have now? Two states that divide, or at least, section out. They parcel out their electoral votes by congressional district. And,
right, Maine being the other one.
It can be done. But because we have that result and because Republicans are reading those results and saying, he may or she may win that stray one electoral vote from Nebraska, don't forget that Republicans in the Nebraska state legislature have been saying, we should change our rules.
But they haven't, because if they did, Maine, which is Democratic with a Democratic governor, would say, well, we'll just change our rules. Screw you.
I mean, they found a way to freeze them in place, but did that cross their minds? Did they start down that path? You bet they did. That one electoral vote. We're going to change all the rules. We've already redistricted this thing 10 ways to make sure that Republicans remain in the vast majority and outnumber Democrats in the legislature, regardless of the populace and the way they vote. But we're going to do it for one electoral vote. Well, okay. Thank God Maine knew what they could do to prevent that from happening. But they'll cheat and change the rules anywhere they can. If they can shorten the break, they should.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Okay. Well, that's the answer then. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, discussing our technical issues in the background. Greg, still, I guess, thanks still going out to the, to your son for the laptop.
Yes,
we're waiting
he lent me his laptop, and his technical expertise was really helpful. You know about that.
Yeah, right.
Like when your kid comes down and says, Dad, why don't you just do this, and this? And
yes.
I'm thinking to myself, I was getting to that, but I forgot where it was.
Well, see, this time, yesterday afternoon, my son came down and said, all right, well, here's the edited show. And he said, how old is that laptop? Which laptop? What do you mean? Greg's laptop. Like, I'm afraid it was something of a fire hazard. It sounded like on Monday, but it was gone by Tuesday. What happened? Well, maybe it was a little dusty or something starting it up on Monday. I don't know. It was complaining
we just
about
put in
the
a new battery, as it turns out.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it was.
My son borrowed my toolkit, ordered a battery from Amazon, and then just put a new battery in.
If it wasn't for the kids, this show would sound like garbage.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Well, thanks, kids of all kinds everywhere. Thank you to the youth of
America.
America.
How old is it? It's operating OS Catalina. That's how old.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to the youth of the world for coming together. Let's do it every 4 days instead and keep the computers humming rather than every 4 years. Okay. Well, at any rate, technical notes aside.
But since you brought it up, why are we doing this? Because I got a flood. What about that flood? Some new information is coming in.
Oh.
While it's true that my hometown, Newtown, Connecticut, got 12.1 inches in like 2 hours.
Oof. All right.
Which is like, they're calling it a 1,000-year-old rain. I mean, you only get these once every 1,000 years.
I see. Right.
Oxford, which is just south of us, got 14 inches.
How?
That's where two elderly people were killed because they were swept off the road by the floods. And that's where the dam broke, and that's where
I didn't even hear that.
Roads were just washed away. I mean, it's just awful. It was pretty awful here, but it was even more awful there. So, that was like a major storm. And the thing is, it was a surprise. Nobody was expecting it.
Yeah. It wasn't the hurricane.
It was
it related?
Probably one of Ernesto's bands that sort of like strayed into our area. And what happened is the storm was
in Bermuda.
Offshore, but there was cold air on the northeast, and the storm,
cold air?
The warm hurricane storm met the colder weather, and that's where we had our thunderstorm. And so there was a stray band that sort of came by. It wasn't a derecho, it wasn't a lot of wind, but boy, was there a lot of rain.
Man, I'll say. That's a crazy amount. And, all right, well, and ruined a computer, which is also bad, but on the mend, I hope we'll see.
Yeah, and, in the grand scheme of things, that can be repaired.
Yeah. Right.
So, and hopefully, at least, they'll come and tell me it'll be repaired. Anyway, so there's all of that. And what I wanted to focus on, though, is how the media is just having trouble with all of this. I think we talked about this the other day, but there was this whole story complaining in Semaphore that the media were really upset with the DNC because whereas everybody else was partying, they had less seats, they had less room, and some of the very coveted inside the convention seating was being given over to the bloggers and the influencers and the podcasters.
Well.
And that was really upsetting them.
Oh.
And so I've told this show I've told our audience, I've told you, so often you get sick of it, but, back in the day, when I was going to Washington and working on policy stuff.
Yes.
We would do panels with reporters, and subject matter experts, myself included, about pandemic preparedness and this, that, and everything else. And the reporters always resented the bloggers. They felt we were giving it away for free, even though we were subject matter experts and they weren't. And nothing has changed, and they really resent these new kids, the podcasters and influencers, as they're called, and they hate the idea that their coveted space is being given to these new people who aren't them.
I see.
And it just comes out everywhere. It comes out in the coverage. And let me just give you a little snippet from the New York Times when they're trying to cover the Obamas yesterday.
Okay.
Mr. Obama grew especially animated as he described some of Donald J. Trump's more outlandish behavior. There's childish nicknames, crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes. The former president said, arching his eyebrows and making a suggestive gesture with his hands. Shrinking down his hands as he says crowd sizes, which is very funny.
Yes.
And then the New York Times says, and this is the part I wanted to highlight, warning voters against choosing another 4 years of bluster and bumbling and chaos, Mr. Obama, looking particularly pleased with himself, said, we've seen this movie before. We all know the sequel's usually worse. Why did they need to throw that line in?
Particularly
because
pleased.
They're assholes. That's why.
I guess so.
There's absolutely nothing newsworthy about that. Their opinion in a news article about that Obama is what? Looking particularly pleased with himself? What the hell is that?
I don't know. Someone who wrote that was particularly pleased with themselves for finding a seat, I guess, to write.
Yeah, why are they even writing that? I mean, this is like New York Times resentment that it's not going the way we said. We told you Kamala Harris has to meet with us and talk about policy. She didn't, and she apparently can fill 2 arenas even though she hasn't met. What the hell is up with that? How dare you? I mean, that is the whole tone from the media, not just weird. My imagination. This is a story from the New Republic. By Meredith Shiner, who used to be a reporter herself for some of the major papers.
Yeah.
Beware the pundit brain version of the Democratic convention. As everyday Americans tune in to watch Kamala Harris receive her party's nomination, they should trust what they see with their own eyes, especially as DC's chattering class tries to gaslight them, she writes.
Yeah, I think
and
you
then
mentioned
she talks
this
about what the hell
yesterday.
is this convention for? You think it's for you? Of course it isn't. Like you said, everything's been preordained, so they're not there to pick who's going to be the nominee. It's a show, and that's why they were going on and on and on and on Monday about how dare they? Oh, what a fiasco. A terrible gaffe. Joe Biden's not going on until after 11.
Right.
Well, yesterday was Tuesday.
Yes.
And Barack didn't start till after 11. I didn't hear a peep about it yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Why is that?
Now they're used to it. Or maybe they had
they don't like Joe, is my point. And so they made it their fetish. It didn't matter. And it didn't matter yesterday either. But, they don't dislike Obama the way they did. They don't like him, but they don't dislike him the way they dislike Joe. Obama didn't have a great view of them, and they are well aware of that. But at least he played the game a little bit more. And that's it. It's the game. It's this, that, and everything else. That's what this article in TNR says. As this class of political elites descends on Chicago this week for the Democratic National Convention, the average consumer of news needs to know they're not really coming here to workshop policy, interpret or execute progressive politics, discuss electoral strategy, and when I say elites, I'm including the media. They're coming to attend corporate-sponsored happy hours, eat free meals at the CNN Grill, and if they're really lucky, get a selfie with John Legend. And now, more than ever, we should ask who all of this, the punditry, the hobnobbing, the nasal gazing, who's it really for? Because if this summer has revealed anything, it's that just like the Scott Walkers of yore, we're watching the national media short-circuit before our very eyes. They're insular. They're unprepared. And after years of watching Morning Joe and searching for the birthdays in the political playbook, they don't see their role as speaking to us, but rather speaking to themselves. And that may seem ancillary to the main plot line here. The mainstream media own-goaling themselves out of civic relevance. And I remind you of what you brought up, which is about those stupid fact-checkers, as an example, is a net negative for anybody who believes in the outcome of better, more representative good government. We need a good working press. But those stupid fact-checkers aren't helping democracy. They're not helping anybody.
They could be. I mean, it's not a bad idea.
They should be. And they need to be. And they ain't.
Yeah.
Except if you're Daniel Dale, where you're doing a good job.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it would cost them to say. I don't have a category. I don't have a taxonomy to use yet, but I should remind everybody. I have to fact check everybody. And it should be plain from what I'm doing, but it probably, I guess it does require a statement. These are not the same kinds of facts, or I'm not discovering the same kinds or types or magnitude of lies here that I found elsewhere. The idea that you can go on television and say the other party wants to murder babies, and I'll say, well, that's untrue. And also then I'll later say, he didn't say drink bleach. He hinted sort of that you should be injecting it into your lungs, but
maybe we should look into injecting disinfectant and bright lights.
Yeah. I mean, he should, if you really still want to say something about fact checking it, you should say he still stood there dangerously underinformed in a critical situation and put himself center stage when he should have been off stage. And as a result, said things that were dumb, dangerous, misleading, and kept the world under the thumb of the pandemic for an additional couple of years.
Well, he said stuff that was stupid, that he didn't understand, and that in no way, shape, or form helped you.
No. Yeah. And now they're like, well, he wasn't really saying you should do it. He was saying, well, what would happen if you did? Well, that's stupid. You can't do that as a president, or really you shouldn't do it as a human being, but certainly not as supposedly important one.
He didn't say it's not good for you. He said it's not good for ya. And so, no, you can't say that he said. What are you talking about?
They could preface their column just saying these things are different in kind. that it's true. It's good to know the context of everything. There's a backstory. I'll tell you, why not be informed? But are they the same kinds of things as saying that the other guys are vampire pedophiles and keeping children in a non-existent basement? No, those are different types of lies.
Right. So Mary the Shiner, referring to the media, says, this is an industry run by increasingly reactionary plutocrats who reliably summon their charges to lead a highly effective, but how will you pay for it, pincer movement against anything resembling liberal policy. Meanwhile, there's seemingly no sin grievous enough to earn a Republican the same sort of nullifying skepticism. The Trumpists who aided and abetted the former president's attempt to overturn a lawful election remain in the good graces of America's cable news bookers. That is more frustrating to me than anything else. These people ought to be persona non grata, and there is no way that they should be allowed anywhere near a camera. But there they are.
Yes. It's perfectly acceptable, if not dinner guests, and morning show guests.
And the reason Obama's speech was so relevant yesterday is that Mary the Shiner says, you have to understand what's going on here. They are clinging to a status quo, their status quo, that hasn't matched our reality since Barack Obama was elected president in 2008. And the Tea Party emerged. Again, remember, I was talking about these people resenting bloggers in 2007. Obama's elected 2008. That's the world they want to go back to, where they could yell at bloggers and say, you people need to go to a bloggers ethics conference because you don't do it right.
Yeah.
Those days are gone, folks. You cannot have it back.
Yeah. Could we start with a Supreme Court ethics panel?
Their rules, their conventional wisdom, their savvy takes become more stale, more detached from normal life, more cartoonish with every passing day. She doesn't mention names. I will. Chris Cillizza.
Oh, well, okay. That's just maybe the worst.
Totally fits what she just wrote.
Yeah, I guess so. And not going back to, that's one of the things where we should not be going back to. It's not just about substantive
It's not what Mark Halperin thinks.
Policy.
And what the Gang of 500 said. Those days are gone.
Thank God for it. I mean, talking about what we're going back to. If the press is upset because they don't have seats or what have you. And by the way, I mean, is it not an improvement from the legitimate gripe that they had press filing areas in bathrooms in 2016, right? Wasn't that an issue?
Something like that.
At some point. I mean, that sucks. Legitimate gripe, I think. They got rid of it. They fixed it. Yeah, but I didn't have a palace. Oh, right. Well,
Mary the Shiner goes on to say, the roller coaster news cycle of this summer has revealed not only how little the media have learned from the Trump era of politics, but also how badly they want their little old world back, one where Republican operatives dressed as cable news pundits can shape the decision-making of the Democratic Party. Sensible Democratic leaders are the ones who tack to the right to win over voters, and politicians who can never be won. And everybody can grab a martini at Cafe Milano, Washington, D.C.'s version of what Anthony Bourdain would call the Despots Club, and laugh about it afterwards. And then she goes on to talk about the New York Times.
Yeah. Can't we have back the olden days of who would you rather have a beer with? Drudge rules their world. Which microbrew beer name best describes your candidate? Everyone needed to know that.
Right. So she talks about the Times publishing full stories on Crystal's loving Marianne Williamson's complaints that the party needed an open nomination process. Then there's no reason to completely accept the elevation of the current Vice President Kamala Harris.
There is now. I saw it on TV. She was the only Democrat that
could have logistically used the campaign apparatus as they brilliantly and seamlessly did. And so they got what they wanted, but oh no, not how they wanted it. And when the sweepstakes didn't go to their precise specifications, they found a half dozen of Minnesota's nearly 6 million residents to say they don't love Governor Walz. Probably the only 6 in all of Minnesota who feel that way.
Yeah. And
right? Even as
couldn't
his
even get them all at one
jumped
diner.
20 points after his announcement. Finger on the pulse, baby, she says.
Well, they have to try and find something.
Yes, it's as if the media are actively trying to direct chaos or uncertainty, because chaos and uncertainty create something new, something interesting, a good show, which is what they've decided the whole thing's about.
Yeah.
So it's skewering them, and I think rightly so. It goes on. But I think that she's right. Do not let these talking heads fool you into thinking normal, common sense people or ideas are fringe. We can see with our eyes what's happening. Again, that's another reason Tim Walz upsets them. It's like a normal guy saying normal things. Like, you people are weird. Well, we can't say they're weird. We have to have them on. If we call them weird, then our bookers won't be able to get them on the Sunday show. Yeah, but they are so freaking weird.
Yeah, well, right. They are, and if you didn't book, it would be an interesting thing. I noticed, by the way, that the Republicans, they have boycotted everything under the sun at some point, except the Sunday shows. It's interesting that they don't boycott those. And it would be a great service to America for them to boycott them, not just because we wouldn't hear from them, but it might teach the Beltway press, what if you didn't hear from these idiots all the time? What would collapse? And the answer is nothing. I would know what was going on.
He's not the icon he used to be, but, it would be very nice if Jon Stewart would go on the Sunday shows and say, you know what, you're all a bunch of dicks, and you really should just get off the air.
Yeah, it is interesting that they've never asked them to do that.
Well, it wouldn't have the same cachet as it did when he did it to Tucker Carlson back in CNN days.
Right. That is true, and that's the reason why they don't do it. They don't put him on because he might say something realistic.
Now, here's one other thing that I think is blatantly obvious after somebody mentions it, although some of you could have discerned this even before it was mentioned.
Let's see.
But this is from Slate. It's Zachary Carter writing and says, what's really interesting about this convention?
Tell me.
The Bernie-Hillary divide doesn't exist anymore. No. You have AOC, who is the moderate cheered by every single delegate as she speaks. Yeah, Bernie got up and he did his billionaires and oligarch speech yesterday.
It was interesting.
It was interesting. He got a decent reception, but the dislike between the two, the worries about would they come together in time for the election, could the factions work together? That's gone.
Yeah.
Why? Because Michelle Obama. It's not that she did it, but she crystallized what's going on here. We don't have time for this foolishness.
She hadn't spoken yet, but she certainly brought everybody back to focus. I did see Bernie Sanders speak, and it was interesting. There was still some very big, I guess, Bernie Sanders supporters in the hall, and they, did some chanting and excitement for his speech. And he gave his standard speech. It was not different from what he usually does. What was kind of interesting was there was this energy level from the roll call, and there was this energy level later on for both Obama's speeches and some other speeches as well. And I mean, as if to prove a point of, where there have been Bernie Sanders supporters for a long time saying, no, you guys don't understand. The real message here needs to be focusing on class issues and economic issues, and it's in a different way from it's the economy, stupid. But he got up and he gave his speech, all of which were good points, and he made some other terrific points as well. But they were like, well, that's a good point, but,
It used to be
there wasn't a lot of excitement.
Again, this article points this out, and I think it's true. If you made the article, if you made the point, if you made the argument about class, other people would say it's not about class, it's about race.
Yes.
And vice versa.
Right. And there was a fight about it.
And there was a fight about it. That fight's going.
Yeah.
So Zach Carter writes, 8 years ago, anybody who accused the executive class of stoking racism to divide and conquer workers would have been attacked by an outrage army talking about class. Basically, when Sean Fain said it on Monday night, a relaxed audience just cheered. Yeah. And said, yeah, he's a scab. We're all reunited.
Yeah. And Bernie Sanders did do a good job, by the way, in enumerating all of the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration on his issue, where if you're still one of those people that think that the top issue always for everything or everything is explainable by class, okay. But in the meantime, look, we were in pandemic, we were in economic free fall. That was what was handed to the Biden-Harris administration, and they fixed it. They actually said government can work, can bail us out of this and set things right. Was it perfect? Is it a socialist utopia? No, it didn't have anything to do with that. Just government helping people get out of a big mess and get back on their feet.
And I know I'm a broken record on this, but I will say this again. Bernie, who had a very prominent, timeline to speak in prime time. AOC, same. Mm-hmm. Okay. We're in the hall at the table. Because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Right.
And, they were there and they spoke and they're part of the process and they were welcomed and they were cheered. And the people who don't want to be part of the process, the people who don't want to be at the table, were outside being ignored. And the so-called protests were a complete bust. And this wasn't 1968. And all the pundits who wasted ink on that look like idiots now.
Yep. That was the big takeaway for me from the Sanders speech, was that he said, without saying it, because it would have been even more of a downer to actually say it. It wasn't a super exciting speech, but he did, without saying it, say in his way, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got everything we needed. Thank you, President Biden. Thank you, Vice President Harris. He mentioned, there was a moment there where I was like, oh, I wonder if we're going to hear anything, where he said, and in a time of economic free fall and everybody was out of work and being evicted from their homes, there was the support from the government, the $1,400 per person stimulus check, essentially. And remember when there was the huge $1,400. You said it was going to be, like back when the Democratic Socialists of America were fact checking Biden. You said 2,000. Yeah, and this is what I could get out of the actual Congress that we were handed, which is remarkable all by itself. It wasn't zero.
So this article gets at something else which is going to be really important in 2024, but was also part of the 2016 fighting.
Yes.
And he writes, for all the ink and pixels dedicated to analyzing 2016 contests through race, gender, and class, the most striking and consistent demographic divide was age. Hillary handily defeated Bernie among women overall, but Sanders trounced her by 37 points among women under 30. Back in 2016.
Yes.
Sanders' idealism was innately appealing to the young, whose energy and optimism have always been essential to any project aimed at social change. Mm-hmm. But his appeals to economic justice were uniquely compelling to a generation that came of working age during the Great Recession, a time when the volume of student debt more than doubled. Even college grads who made it into the economic lifeboats knew plenty of people who hadn't. Mm-hmm. Right? So the dividing line between millennials and Gen X wasn't so much a calendar year as an economic order. And so he writes, there's a perpetual refrain in American politics that it's dangerous to rely on young voters, but the young adults of the Bernie Brigade are now middle-aged. Their economic views are no longer a standard deviation or two removed from the mean. And Biden recognized this when he took office and he started incorporating Elizabeth Warren people into his staff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
As this points out. And it's worked. And that's helped to bridge the divide. Another thing, thank you, Joe. But it's not the issue that it was. And now when Biden, who did have his issues with younger people, is now not on the ticket, and he's, as they say in the media business, passed the torch on to Kamala Harris, and she is exciting younger people, which is absolutely positively true. And you see that spike in enthusiasm, volunteers, and money. She raised $500 million in the month at 1 month.
Enthusiasms.
Exactly.
1 month, $500 million.
That $500 million there.
Yeah.
Worth of dollars.
Well, you got to have.
It's a disaster.
Dr. Evil. $1 million.
Oh, that's what we were doing. 1 billion. Yes, $500 million. Well, how does he say it? Not a billion, but halfway there. It's a good start.
So she's exciting young people. Young people are getting on board. There's a very, very interesting sort of focus group that was done that I saw with younger black voters. And one guy, it was on Morning Joe this morning, and one guy who's just really honest and really, really clear about this. I don't like Donald Trump. For guys like me who look like me, there is absolutely no way life was going to get better if Trump were elected. And I'll vote for Kamala. Have to lose? And if Kamala's elected, I'm not so sure life is going to get better for me. I don't know that. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. But I know it's not going to happen under him. So, maybe I'll give her a chance.
We saw it. I mean, it's easy to make that decision. It's not even speculative. It sucked when he was president. Things were worse for, in his case, for him.
Yeah. So will younger people vote? I think younger people will vote. They don't always vote in, the off-year elections. That's always been the Democratic Party problem.
Yes. Yeah.
But for presidential elections, they'll come out. They have.
Yeah.
And now they have
easy to understand. And, what they need to be working on
Michelle told them they needed to, so done deal. They'll vote.
Yeah. Oh, well, people won't be necessarily watching the convention in order to get this, but there was a video clip that might help. I don't know, might help with the midterm elections. Like, here's the thing. You want to avoid having to be in this situation. Somebody had put together a compilation of all of the times that Kamala Harris broke ties in the Senate.
It's really, really interesting.
And the things that it was for.
51-50, 50-49.
Yeah.
And on big, important rules, laws, things.
Yeah, it made a difference. And so we don't have to rely on the vice president all the time. Thank God we were able to. We don't have to rely on them all the time. If you do come out in the same numbers in midterm elections, we won't have these sorts of situations, or we'll have a lot fewer of them.
Right.
So there you go. Okay.
Anyway,
time
Chuck
for some
Schumer
music.
spoke yesterday.
He did. He danced.
He did.
Sorry.
And again, because of that, RNC versus DNC, I just couldn't envision Mitch McConnell coming down, the aisle dancing and getting up there and smiling even.
The grimace. So they peel back his cheeks and there were teeth underneath. It was totally different. It wasn't the most graceful thing in the world, but it was definitely different. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. What do we have for you for the next hour? Well, gosh, there's an awful lot that we could be getting to. Let's, we'll run through the articles and find the things to talk about and make 2-minute articles take 20 minutes with fun and exciting commentary and various things of that sort. Let's see. In fact, I'm just checking the email and got some fun things coming through, and some discussion as we had the other day of Greg bringing me up to speed on Hot Ones and what it's all about and how it goes. Got an email from longtime listener Linda Chapman who says that Hot Ones is a big part of your life. I guess they know about it. They've been watching it. They're fans, and they did. This is an interesting suggestion, and maybe a good fundraiser, great house party fundraiser suggestion. She didn't make that connection, but hey, why not? Just sort of occurs to me that they did a family Hot Ones party a few weeks ago, and so very popular type of party, I'm sure. Like for instance, I've been to various tasting parties, whether it's food or beer or wine or whiskey. Did a whiskey tasting at some point. But now a Hot Ones party. This is a good idea. So as she said, they found online a very good bargain for and this is just a great marketing idea. I don't know how long Hot Ones has been on the air, but this is what's described as a season 23 home party box. And I don't know how long a season is for Hot Ones, but they seem to have done an awful lot of seasons, and you get to, I guess, make some additional merchandising money for each one of these things. We need a product on this show. I don't know if I can come up with one, but So I guess you can buy them by season, and there are 10 hot sauces that they tried during the course of the season. I don't know how many they normally go through, but I mean, great marketing idea. We'll sell you a box of a collection of the hot sauces that we used on this season, and then this season, and then this season. And if you're a huge fan, you want to collect all the sauces, all the seasons, I guess you can just keep paying them more and more money. In this case, they got one for half price, so pretty awesome. And the upshot of it, as she says, so fun. Even the people who, quote, don't like spice loved it. Here's how you handle it if you're a Tim Walz kind of person and a little bit worried about the spice. I had mentioned, like, hot wings, like super hot. Like, to me, I don't see the attraction other than saying, haha, I lived. But, you know, some people love the thing. It's not that I don't like spice. I love spice. And recently, because this area in Virginia has such a tremendous, my focus has been tremendous South Asian community. And so as a result, the food scene is booming, and my horizons of, experience with Indian food as a result, or broadly speaking, South Asian food, has expanded tremendously. So also my understanding of what it means to be spicy with the food has changed dramatically. Whereas previously, my experience with, this food is very spicy, maybe even too spicy, has been like Mexican food or hot pepper sauce flavored stuff, versus, no, this food is spicy, but it doesn't burn my face. It's a lot to handle. Sometimes it's too much, and sometimes it is hot spicy as well. But there's also just, that's just got a lot of different spices in it. There's so much going on. It's spicy, but none of it is blowing my head off. So anyway, but yeah, I've never really seen the fun in like, this hurts, or this doesn't taste like anything. It's just giving me an allergic reaction, right? My mouth is on fire, not like, wow, it's overwhelmed by flavor, but it hurts and is throbbing or is turning red. That's like not for me necessarily, but this is a great way of dealing with it. And she says, okay, even for people who quote unquote don't like spice, had a great time at it. They sampled all the hot sauces, or most of the people at the party were willing to sample all the hot sauces, but they cut down on the consumption essentially and say, well, look, you just have just one bite. Just taste it. You don't have to eat the whole wing. And I mean, that's really the point of the show, I guess, was that on hot ones, you eat the whole thing and you deal with the elevating spice levels. But if you just want to get a sampling of what's going on, that's something most people can get along with. I know what I'm in for, and there's drinks here, and we're not going to have any of the really super dangerous peppers and not just eat a pepper as like the YouTube kids do, which it's like, the chemicals are giving you, the problem here is humans are allergic to these peppers. And you're having an allergic reaction is what's really going on here. And how much of it can you tolerate? Well, that's not really a great subject for a show, but it is a good subject for a party. So whether it was wings or they also did some grilled salmon, which, as they point out, as Pacific Northwesterners is standard summer party fare. And they just try it a little bit. So if you didn't know, Hot Ones has these home party boxes out there. That sounds like kind of a good idea. If you want to be a part of that, if you want to, have some personal connection to or understanding of it, should it come into play, Hot Ones, as everyone is predicting. Okay. That wasn't the big news item. I just thought it was an interesting, new way of experiencing that angle on the developing cultural story of Tim Walz not liking spice or what have you, or if you had never heard, as I hadn't, of Hot Ones because, how many podcasts can you listen to or whatever? And that's not one of the ones on my list, but I don't know. I'd try the spices. I'd go to one of those parties for sure. So invite me. Maybe I'm in your state. I don't know. Could happen. I haven't been to the Pacific Northwest yet. Got to try that one next. Okay. So what about other stories to share? Here's one that has been widely circulated and is fun because we're all in the mode of poking fun at or telling terrible stories about Donald Trump because he's a horrible human being and should never have been president and should certainly never make that mistake again. Stephanie Grisham, who, like an idiot, signed on for Trump's first term in office and thought, I'm going to get rich just like him by knuckling under and serving the oligarchs, and then found out, no, he's a face-eating leopard after all, and now is warning us all not to get our faces eaten. Valuable service, but you do have to keep in mind, this is all because they didn't get to lord it over us like they thought they were going to by signing up for the first term. Anyway, Trump apparently is a real dick and everybody hates him. And he, more importantly, hates everyone else. Trump calls his supporters basement dwellers, says his former press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, which is amazing. On a number of levels, at the basement level in particular. And, he's right. This is the most normal thing he's said so far. And here's the story of it. Stephanie Grisham excoriates ex-president, that's Trump, at Democratic convention and says he has no empathy, no morals, and he doesn't. And I guess we thought it would be fun to hear that from, people who had their faces eaten by leopards at the Democratic National Convention. And yeah, it's all right. There's a place for it. You can come crying to us. We always thought it was true, and it's kind of confirmation for us that it was. So it has some value. It's not that we're saying we're about to nominate her for president or any other office. Stephanie Grisham, Donald Trump's former press secretary, excoriated the Republican presidential nominee, that's Donald Trump, at the Democratic National Convention on Tuesday, saying he has no empathy, no morals, and no fidelity to the truth or wives or anything like that. Grisham, a Republican operative, and that hasn't changed, who also served as spokesperson to Melania Trump, so she was there to, I guess, steal Michelle's speech again, offered firsthand accounts of the former president's behavior behind closed doors. Now, that would have been something, by the way. They rose above the temptation and went high. But it is interesting that Michelle Obama, from whom Melania Trump cribbed so much of her own speeches, the press secretary and speechwriter for Melania is there the same day as Michelle Obama. That would have been something. Put them both on stage and why did you do that? Well, that wasn't the purpose of her visit. And you want to be a gracious host sometimes too. So, okay. I wasn't just a Trump supporter, she says. I was a true believer. I was one of his closest advisors. The Trump family became my family, she said, saying she spent her holidays at Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, which, again, don't spend your holidays in a pervert sex dungeon. It's a bad idea. I mean, there are people who enjoy it, and if you go in with your eyes open and you want to be there, that's one thing. But if you go there thinking, I'm rising to the pinnacle of power, importance, and relevance here in the United States, but you're really just at a filthy sex dungeon, well, you're going to come away with nothing. But I guess if you're there for the sex, like Roger Stone and Jeffrey Epstein were, they can be happy with that. And I guess, one's dead and one is just, I guess waiting to die. And anyway, the point is, I guess she can come and give us or other people a warning. Don't be a true believer. It's a dumb thing. They are not even true believers. You will look like a fool in the end. So I suppose that's a real lesson. She goes on to say, I saw him when the cameras were off. Trump mocks his supporters. He calls them basement dwellers. On a hospital visit one time when people were dying in the ICU, he was mad that the cameras were not watching him. And I imagine that was maybe a COVID-related visit, maybe not. I don't know. She continued, he used to tell me, it doesn't matter what you say, Stephanie. Say it enough and people will believe you. of course, say it as Donald Trump, and people won't. She repeated a story that she has told before, that during the January 6th insurrection, she asked Melania Trump whether she could tweet that there was, quote, no place for lawlessness or violence, and the First Lady gave a one-word reply, no. Yeah. Grisham earned applause when she said that she was the first senior staffer to resign that day. Okay. She ended her short speech with an endorsement of Kamala Harris, saying, I love my country more than my party. Kamala Harris tells the truth. She respects the American people, and she has my vote. The Harris campaign and the Democratic National Convention have been highlighting Republican voters who oppose Trump and are supporting the Democratic ticket. Before Grisham, Kyle Sweetster, an Alabama voter, is that who I saw on TV? Told the convention crowd that he voted for Trump 3 times and repeatedly donated to the Republican. He told us he'd look out for blue-collar workers. I don't think this is the guy I saw, though. But Trump's tariff policies negatively affected him, he said. Costs for construction workers like me were starting to soar. I realized Trump wasn't for me. He was lining his own pockets, or for lining his own pockets. Sweetster added, I'm not left-wing, period. But I believe our leaders should bring out the best in us, not the worst. That's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris. She's tough. She's going to tackle inflation. Trump will make it worse. I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she'll make us proud to be American again. Other Republicans due to speak at the convention include Olivia Troy, a national security staffer who worked for Mike Pence, whom he tried to have murdered. The former vice president, by the way. Not the vice president now, and not even on the ticket now because they want him dead, not on the ticket. Adam Kinzinger, of course, former Republican representative who has been a vocal critic of Trump. John Giles, a Republican mayor of Mesa, Arizona. Jeff Duncan as well, former lieutenant governor of Georgia. He's losing Republicans of note in Georgia, left and right, because constantly attacking them. Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and fixer, also showed up at the convention on Tuesday night. Wanted to get to the CNN grill, I guess. He and Trump have fallen out, and Cohen has served as a witness for the prosecution in Trump's hush money trial, where he was convicted on 34 counts, by the way. In New York, it was not exactly clear why he showed up, but when a reporter asked if he would speak at the convention, he responded, only if they let me, and of course I would. Well, they didn't let him. We don't really need to hear much more out of Michael Cohen, probably. But yeah, okay, so people who have had their faces eaten by leopards are here to say, ouch, it hurts. Vote for the person who isn't a leopard. That would be a good idea. Okay, it's worth noting that this happened. Let's see, other items that have been tucked away. Let's just run through them and see what else we can take a look at. I guess another entry in the weird category, and you can never stop emphasizing the weird. Amanda Marcotte has this, and, also another thing we like to emphasize. Amanda Marcotte, she writes things. We read them. J.D. Vance's complaints about fake polls. Speaking of Michael Cohen, I think Michael Cohen really first entered the national consciousness, at the time he appeared on TV, right? And the people interviewing him said all of the polls, or what do you say about the polls that show Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump, that he's down in the polls? Says who? Well, says everyone, every poll. Now, that was one of the more interesting moments, especially if you've been spending your time since then thinking about election interference and the Russia that he calls a hoax, right? That all the polls did show that Hillary was going to win. And okay, she didn't, right? So reconcile that. Maybe he was right the whole time and we were wrong, but it seems more likely, it was rather an audacious thing. Normal people at that point don't say every single poll in America is wrong. The truth is that we're going to win overwhelmingly. Even if you're super confident in your abilities and you just want to cheerlead for your team, you still say, well, the only poll that matters is the one on election day, et cetera, et cetera. Things like that. You don't say, no, all the polls are fake. All the polls are rigged. We're definitely going to win. There's no doubt about it. Unless you have something weird in your pocket. And maybe that's Russia. Anyway, they're going back to the fake polls thing. J.D. Vance's complaints about fake polls eviscerated by massive explosion of energy at the DNC. And, Greg and I were mentioning, we hate to see this stuff. We're tired of hearing, eviscerated. But I guess it really kind of was an evisceration, as it turns out, last night. The raucous crowd at the Democratic shindig contrasts with the low energy Republican National Convention. You got to hear some of that in audio format earlier on. Amanda writes, organizers kicked off the Democratic National Convention by immediately demonstrating that they know how to throw a party better than Republicans. Democrats scheduled their elderly leader who rambles on too long for the first night. Oh, come on. Not the last. President Joe Biden's Monday night speech started slow and only got more boring. I don't know. But the crowd cheered him gamely, chanting, "Thank you, Joe." Part of that was real gratitude for the surprisingly effective job he's done in his 4 years in office, but the cheers reflected the attendees' joy at knowing this whole thing is done with. Maybe. It's time to move forward with a candidate who embodies their hopes for the future. In contrast, Donald Trump's capstone speech at the Republican National Convention was disastrous, or as Bernie Sanders would say, a disaster. Biden may have been long-winded and boring, but Trump was all those things while also sounding objectively weird. His speech ping-ponged between self-pity and incoherence, delivered in that odd, sing-song, quiet voice he uses when his aides tell him to act serious. The crowd, always eager to flatter the cult leader's ego, and there's been a lot of mention of that cult of personality, was a theme from the Obamas last night. They were eager to flatter the cult leader's ego, and they cheered, but it felt forced and exhausted. The Democratic National Convention so far has maintained the organic energy of a champagne bottle being uncorked, and that momentum appears to be causing the Trump campaign to short-circuit. Consistently, what you've seen in 2016 and 2020 is that the media use fake polls to drive down Republican turnout and create dissension and conflict within Republican voters. Trump's running mate, weirdo Supreme Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, said on Fox News Sunday. Shannon Bream of Fox News asked him about polls showing Vice President Kamala Harris edging up or even leading in various swing states, to which Vance rushed to show once again that there are no limits for him when it comes to embracing his boss's delusions or depravities. The Trump campaign is in a very, very good spot, he insisted. And that's at least standard lying, as opposed to Michael Cohen says who? We're leading in all the polls. All the polls that say she's leading are wrong and they're lies. And he didn't, he had the good sense not to go there. Do that and you end up eventually testifying against the man in court, it seems. Vance is not a dumb man, so we can guess he's lying rather than delusional. The 538 aggregator has Harris with a small lead of 2.9 points nationally after correctly predicting the outcome of 2020 and even slightly underrating the Democratic turnout in 2022, but having been on the ground at both the Republican and Democratic conventions, Amanda says that is she, can say he's off on the vibes department as well. While people at the RNC, which was before Biden dropped out of the race, while they were confident about the election, they seemed oddly muted for people who think they're about to sail into victory. In contrast, the DNC's enthusiasm was off the charts from the beginning, and that's a pretty good point, right? At the time they held the Republican National Convention, as boring, as low-key, as low energy as it was, and you heard it in the video, these were people who thought everything was a lock now. They're totally going to destroy Biden, and they thought he was going to be the opponent. Why aren't they more enthusiastic and energetic? As Andrew O'Hare wrote about the RNC last month, the convention was a startlingly quiet, polite, low-energy event. We did witness the audience get hyped up for Hulk Hogan, but even that has caveats. It was the last night, so more people bothered to show up. Hogan's a professional wrestler and expert at riling up crowds over nonsense, though the actual message of his speech was terrifying and fascistic. And frankly, after 4 days of listlessly wandering around hoping something interesting might happen, the attendees seemed eager to feel something, but Trump destroyed Hogan's hard work with his whining, droning, weird speech. On Tuesday night, Harris made the contrast crystal clear by holding a rally at the Fiserv Forum. Is that how you say it? Fiserv? I don't know. Weird companies that have existed for 15 minutes now own stadiums, where the RNC was held. That was a big part of it. A lot of people were saying that was trolling Trump by using the same venue that they did and filling it to capacity, whereas he had bored a half-assed, half-filled crowd to tears. It speaks volumes about the enthusiasm gap that it's not even surprising that the turnout and volume at this Harris rally outdid what Trump got at his own convention last month. The difference was dramatic enough that Harris and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, in case you haven't heard, appeared at the DNC by remote video from Milwaukee, and it created the visual effect of more than doubling what Trump was able to turn, despite covering his ear with a comically oversized bandage and everything. And we took a big rally and put it inside of another big rally for a double dose of huge rally excitement. That was the upshot of it. Polls cannot meaningfully cover or measure enthusiasm. It's too bad. And
enthusiasm.
We give it the adequate treatment, I think, by playing that clip over and over and over again. But here are other signs, or there are other signs, and here they are, that Trump is losing steam. As Heather Digby Parton wrote on Monday at Salon, she's seeing far fewer Trump signs out in the rural areas than years past. What? Yard signs? Shut up, Digby. You know they don't vote. Come on now. Okay. Yay. Finally. Look, they're indicative of something. And generally speaking, it's enthusiasms that they're indicative of. And of course, Trump himself doesn't seem to be doing too well. In his public appearances, he keeps ranting about the change in the Democratic nominees, calling it a coup and an overthrow. We read about that yesterday. The usual psychological projection from a man who really did attempt a coup to overthrow Biden's presidency. For some reason, his attempt to counter-program on the first night of the DNC was a lackluster speech in front of a small group of people and some manufacturing equipment. That's what you'll tune in for. It appears the 150 folks who showed up were struggling to stay awake as Trump talked and talked about nothing anyone cares about. To be sure, Biden's speech went on too long, but people were happy over what it symbolized. He's moving on. Now, America, I gave my best to you, the president said, making it clear that he too sees this as a farewell address. The audience believed it to be. Now, the process of remembering him fondly begins. Trump, meanwhile, will only be remembered fondly by the most deplorable people, but he refuses to go away. Even though his shtick is growing ever more tiresome. He's struggling to recapture the shock value that once came so easily to him because he's saddled with severe personality disorders that allow him to say the vile things decent human beings are incapable of. He's even tried leveling sexually explicit smears at her, but it was greeted by liberals in the press with a shrug. Trump, being the worst, isn't titillating anymore. He is, to quote a statement from the Harris campaign, old and quite weird. Trump's entire appeal to his base was that he knows how to trigger the liberals. But if the liberals aren't triggered anymore, what good is he to them? It is finally, after 9 years of this trolling, reaching the point of that famous Onion article in 2001, Marilyn Manson now going door to door trying to shock people. This is a big shift, even from the last election. In 2020, MAGA types could still get a sadistic glee out of liberals by refusing to follow public health guidelines and spreading the coronavirus. Biden won because people were exhausted and fearful, approaching their ballots with grim determination. But the whole election cycle was dominated by this trigger the liberals mentality, from the videos of right-wingers refusing to wear masks in public to, of course, the terrifying violence of January 6th. With Harris as the nominee, however, you can feel Democratic voters unclenching. This is not a crowd that feels triggered. The mood is giddy. There's a scent of hope in the air. There's plenty of criticism of Trump, but it's no longer coming from a place of cornered animals trying to survive. The tone towards that babbling old fascist is one of contempt. Instead of flinching, Democrats are laughing in Trump's face. Disgusting as it is, no wonder he's even more obsessed with crowd sizes and ratings than usual. He used to be the one offering the entertainment value, even if it was only to his base that just wanted to inflict pain on their perceived enemies. Now it's Harris who's captivating. This time to a nation that wants to feel something other than despair. Of course, Trump can still win. You gotta look out for that. His base is grumpy and bitter, but they are numerous. A vote cast out of spite still counts as much as a vote cast out of hope. The Harris campaign has a lot of work ahead, and everybody said so last night. Nobody ignored that. The work being turning that enthusiasm into actual ballots. No one should be complacent, as Harris herself keeps emphasizing she's the underdog in this race, especially when the Electoral College counts more heavily the votes from rural and suburban areas where the MAGA anger still dominates. But there's now no doubt that there is nothing fake about the energy Harris is generating. The DNC is practically vibrating with it. So we'll be right back with more. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time to move on. There was another sentence or two. I feel bad cutting off the grand finale of the piece, but you got the substance of it. But basically, she was just saying, comparing the two conventions. Amanda Marcotte had been at both. There was nothing fake, as J.D. Vance was trying to insinuate about the energy that Harris was generating. The DNC, as she says, is practically vibrating with it. Even as they stand in interminable security lines to enter, the attendees have a buoyant air about them. It's like being at Disneyland, right? They make being in line fun somehow. It's a striking contrast with the get it over with flavor of the RNC. People want to look forward to the future again. For the first time in a long time, it feels like that's possible. Yes, people are beginning to envision Donald Trump finally kicking it, I think. And, it's been happening for a while. He's deteriorating in front of everyone's eyes. That's not going to bring young people out. It just isn't, even though there are young weirdos and young Nazis who it must excite for some reason. Anyway, lots of other things to catch up on. You know what? I put this aside just to give myself a reminder to head back to I fact-checked myself. When I've been describing what's been going on in Georgia, or reading the articles which are describing what's been going on in Georgia, and reminding everybody that it is still the Republican plan, the MAGA plan, to just simply ignore all the rules and all the laws and say, well, what if we just declare Trump to have won, even when everyone can see that he is not? Or at a minimum, if we can't get people to do that, can't we just tell them, if you're bitter and angry about the outcome of the election, can't you just refuse to certify it and say, I refuse to certify it because reasons. And sometimes you don't need reasons. But if you're still in a state where you're supposed to have a reason, you can say, questions have arisen. Concerns are lingering. I heard that there were 2,000 mules. I heard that there was something, bamboo in the ballots, whatever it is, you can make something up. And if you're not clever enough to make something up, or you feel like you shouldn't even have to make something up and you should just be able to stomp your feet and say, I'm not going to do it. You can't make me. There are some states that have changed the rules so that you will be able to simply say, I don't know what the reason is, but I'm not signing the goddamn thing. And that's it. And so I was trying to remind everybody, what kind of chaos can you create? And one of the issues essentially is, well, what do you do if the Electoral College is supposed to meet and cast their ballots, and because you haven't gone through the correct steps, because you have people who are denying reality and won't sign the papers that they're charged with signing, what do you do if your state's electoral votes aren't ready to go on, I kept saying December 14th. That would have been December 14th, 2020, which was when, it's not like a fixed date in the same way that January 6th is, and January 3rd is for swearing in the new Congress, and January 6th for counting the electoral votes. Those dates are fixed with the exception. I don't know whether they still carry the same caveat of, well, if it falls on a Sunday, we used to do this. We used to we don't have any state religion here, but we used to pick out one religion's Sabbath and say, well, we can't hold this business on that day because we got to honor the Sabbath, even though we weren't honoring anybody else's Sabbath. But okay. Anyway, no, December 14th is not fixed as the date in the same way that January 20th is fixed these days for inauguration. It's much more like Election Day. It happens on the Tuesday, the falling after the Wednesday, after this, it has the same sort of formula. So the date that the Electoral College will meet in 2024 is December 17th. Why is it the 17th? Because really, it's supposed to be the first, ready for this one? They meet on the first Tuesday following the second Wednesday in December. In other words, if Tuesday is the first day of December, fine, but it won't be, it has to follow the second Wednesday, right? So it's never going to be too early. Well, I don't know why they come up with this formula, but the first Tuesday that follows a second Wednesday. Got it? So that happens to be December 17th. That's the day that the electors meet in each state to select the president and vice president of the United States, et cetera, et cetera. I have this from something from the archives, the National Archives and Records Administration, that has a 2024 Electoral College key dates and events for state officials and points of contact. These are the dates that you're supposed to worry about. And I guess Republicans reading this are saying, which dates should we target for effing everything up? And just so you know what's going on here, and here in the term state does include the District of Columbia, and the term executive includes state governors and the mayor of the District of Columbia. Here's what they're supposed to be doing. By November 5th, of course, is Election Day. Why is it the Election Day? Because Election Day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, whereas the Electoral College meets the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday. I'm glad they wrote that down because no one would remember that. But it's complicated and stupid, but that's how they do it. November 5th, they have, is the last day for voting is what they should really be calling it, Election Day. But because then the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December, which is the date for the Electoral College, falls on December 17th, they backtrack to give us a different date earlier. By December 11th, 2024, that would be the deadline for issuing and sending certificates of ascertainment. That is, at least 6 days before the meeting of the electors, you need to prepare, send, and retain extra copies of your certificates of ascertainment. What are certificates of ascertainment? What are you ascertaining? What are you certifying? That you have ascertained, come to understand, gone through the process, and come to the conclusion that these people will be the electors for this state because this candidate won, and these are the people named ahead of time as prospective electors should this candidate win. We have ascertained who they are. We know who's supposed to be showing up on the 17th, and here they are. And then you prepare a certificate of ascertainment, and you send one of them to the archives, and you retain 6 original certificates of ascertainment to provide to the electors for the meeting of the electors, and they get signed and sent on after that to the federal judge of the district, to the Congress, etc. Everybody who needs to see every step of the process. Why are we counting these ballots here on January 6th? Because of the ballots of the Electoral College. Who says they're the ballots of the Electoral College? The local officials, the state officials who have conducted this. 1, counted the vote and verified the outcome. 2, ascertained therefore who the electors will be. And thirdly, have I done this by ABC or by 1, 2, 3? And thirdly, verified that the people who we said were supposed to show up as electors did. We got their IDs and everything. We will satisfy even ordinarily the Republicans who insist on that everybody be ID'd positively. But now they're unhappy with that, so they're just going to fake their own thing. By the way, how about that? For all the people who said, we got to have ID for everyone, we got to prove your citizenship, and in fact, we have to have the real IDs. Remember when they passed that stupid law that we're going to have the Real ID Act? Which, of course, was motivated out of, I'm so scared that millions of illegal immigrants, as they call them, will come flooding across the border and do what? Immediately try to participate in the public policy making process by registering to vote and casting ballots. Which, of course, if you are here undocumented, 1, you can't do, and 2, you won't do, because you will be in trouble, and they don't want trouble. But by the way, what a horrific thing to do. We came to America to try to make a better life for ourselves. And we know that America, a democracy, values participation in that democracy. And we would propose, if the law would permit it, that we participate in that process and be heard as human beings who want to say in their own governance. But unfortunately, no. I mean, I just don't know what's wrong with it. I guess the idea is that you're supposed to look out for is, well, what if China sends a billion people here to vote, and then they vote and then they go home? We got to draw the line somewhere. All right, fine. So the line is going to be the Real ID Act, which basically just means that you have to pay more and wait longer and experience a larger pain in the butt to get your driver's license. So, everybody in America now has to pay an extra $35 or whatever, and you got to wait an extra week to get your license in the mail versus having it produced right there in the DMV and whatever else. So a huge inconvenience for all the people who were supposedly protecting with this stupid law, and inconvenience for no one because they're not going to try to get fake licenses, Real ID or otherwise. But for all the people who are screaming that we got to Real ID all this stuff and make it impossible to forge your identification, right? That was the whole idea. The Real ID is going to be hard to get, and because you have to not only provide all sorts of proof of citizenship and legal presence in the state, et cetera, but you got to wait an extra week or two and pay even more money to get one of these things because we're so afraid of forgery. What's really weird is that same party and that same gang of idiots forged electoral college votes and certificates of ascertainment. Wow. There's hypocrisy, and then there's, holy cow, I can't believe this level of hypocrisy. Well, that's what we're talking about happening here. So then it turns out, right, December 17th, the electors vote. You got to prepare certificates of vote. Look at all the different certificates here, right? December 11th, you got to prepare your certificates of ascertainment. You got to send one certificate of ascertainment to the Archivist of the United States. Retain 6 original certificates of ascertainment to provide to the electors for the meeting of the electors. Why 6 copies? Again, this is an anti-counterfeiting, essentially, an anti-counterfeiting measure, or an it's a fail-safe for, well, what happens if the one you send to the archivist of the United States doesn't make it there, or it's stolen by a mob and burned, or something like that. Well, there's 6 other copies elsewhere. So it makes some sense. Then on December 17th, the electors vote. They cast their votes. Everybody documents it. How do they do it? You prepare certificates of the vote. Not only have you prepared certificates of ascertainment, these are the people who are supposed to be voting, and we verified that these are the people who did in fact show up to vote, even if one of them is an alternate. You document that fact and have everybody attest to it and sign several copies of this document. But then when they hold the vote, you have a certificate that says, all right, we certify that these are the people who showed up, that these are the people who are supposed to show up. They are supposed to show up because we have certified the vote in the state, and we've certified the vote in the state because we've certified the vote in every county, and we certified the vote in every county based on the certification of every vote in every precinct. Everything gets certified. People say all the time on every level, I swear this is true. Come and get me. Drag me to court. I'll swear on a Bible, the whole thing. Maybe not your Bible, but someone else's if necessary. But maybe they'll give you a copy if you're lucky of your own kind. Anyway, the point is everyone will swear that this is the case. And if it turns out that you're just lying your ass off and they can prove it, well, then you go to jail. Bad. No one wants to do that. Certify the votes at the precinct. Certify the votes at the county. Certify the votes at the state. Or maybe just say, nah, screw it, the whole thing, I refuse. And then you determine, all right, based on the statewide vote, we know who the electors are going to be. Let's bring them in here. Show me your ID. Yes, we actually have them do that. And certify that these are the right people. And then they vote. And then we say, all right, they voted. Everyone knows how they voted, but let's certify it. There's going to be a prepared certificates of the vote. You're going to then pair those certificates of the votes with the retained certificates of ascertainment. Here's the vote, and here's the certificate that says these are the people who were supposed to have been voting after all. And then you send those pairs of certificates over to the archives, to the judges, to the Congress, to everyone who's supposed to get them. And then, after that, there's another date. And it's funny. Nobody's busy this day, right? December 25th, 2024. And you'd think that maybe they'd say, well, okay, maybe not that day. Do it the next day, Boxing Day. But December 25th, sure, it's Christmas, but why December 25th is a little inconvenient. Doesn't seem like the date you'd pick out of a hat for something like this in terms of getting people to work. But that's because December 25th is the deadline to meet the demand that this happen no later than the 4th Wednesday in December. Just so happens it's the 25th. By that point, designated federal and state officials must receive the paired certificates no later than that 4th Wednesday in December. So Merry Christmas. Here are the paired certificates. And if they come late, you have a problem of some sort. How do you deal with it? Depends what the problem is. We could look it up. But the idea here for Republicans is, what if we mess this up? What if instead of Merry Christmas, it's the Grinch who steals Christmas, and we just refuse to tell the rest of official America what actually happened in our state? We tell them something else. Or we tell them nothing at all. All right. Other dates of general interest, by the way, on or before January 3rd. The archivist will transfer the certificates to Congress, the new Congress. As a matter of fact, as the new Congress assembles, the archivist transmits those sets of certificates to Congress as requested. This generally happens when the Senate does not receive its set of certificates on time if the archivist brings them over. The transfer occurs in late December, usually, or early January, when OFRs, Office of who? What are we talking? Federal Register? I don't know. OFR. I'll look it up. Legal staff meets with the representatives of the Secretary of the Senate, the Clerk of the House, and congressional parliamentarians. There's a whole process for handing those things over. Has to happen on or before January 3rd. And here, again, Republicans last time around said, what if we just gave them a different set of documents that said a different thing? Wouldn't they have to just read those? No, because they're not real documents that went through this real process. What if we said they were? Well, I don't know. Probably, again, no. And in this case, Vice President at the time, Mike Pence, said, no, you can't just do that. And so what did they say to Vice President Pence? We want to murder you. That's not great. We don't want that. January 6th is the next date. Of course, you know what day that is. Congress counts the electoral votes. They meet in joint session to count the votes unless Congress passes a law to change that date. Passes a law. That means, actually, I guess, it's not a resolution. They say pass a law. That must mean signature by the president. So, that's a tough bar. The president of the Senate, the archivist of the United States, and other designated federal and state officials must have the electoral votes in hand at this time. And what the Republicans were aiming for last time, and I guess might be aiming for this time, is what if we just don't hand them over, or we prevent other states from handing them over, such that nobody gets to 270? Can't we then say, oh, that triggers the election by the House of Representatives? And ordinarily it does. So that's what they're hoping for if they lose. Can't we just do it that way? And then, of course, next up would be January 20th, the inauguration, if everything, gets to that point. But that's their hope. If we lose the election, can't we just make it such that there aren't enough electoral votes to get to 270 in hand on January 6th? And then can't we vote by delegation? Of course, we don't know what the delegations are going to be. I suppose the supreme irony would be that they all refuse to certify this stuff, and then it turns out, oh, you actually don't control the majority of the delegations anymore. And guess what? They've selected Kamala Harris as president. Good idea. Anyway, just wanted to throw out all of those dates and why they are those dates, and just how much certification goes on, and how many important federal statutes Republicans violated by forging all of those documents last time. And then a quick reminder that the guy who said, no, that's not the way this works, or that is not how this works exactly. And then they said, well, what if we told you that we had set up a gallows outside and began chanting, not USA, USA, but hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence. And I don't know, make of it what you will. Fact check, they didn't hang Mike Pence. Or fact check, Donald Trump never said he wanted to hang Mike Pence. Fact check, that noose, or the gallows wasn't real. They didn't have a trap door. It might not really have strangled him to death. And they never got their hands on him anyway, except, there was video of them missing him by seconds and having to be spirited out of the Capitol. And, of course, the testimony that tells us that Mike Pence hanging out, finally, in the loading dock with the cars ready to speed him away, saying, I'm not getting in that car. No, because I don't know where I'm headed. There are people out to murder me. I think it might just cede control of the whole situation if I leave the building. I mean, all of that going through his mind. But fact check, Donald Trump never said that he wanted to hang Mike Pence. True, but who's the vice presidential nominee right now? When was the last time that a president just simply jettisoned a VP candidate who was still alive and still a Republican, but jettisoned him anyway because he was so mad at him that maybe he deserves it. Maybe they care about the election more than that. They had an insurrection, violence, beating cops, threatening to murder the vice president of the United States, forged electoral certificates. And by the way, they're still writing in the newspapers comparing the two conventions. Well, one of them was more exciting than the other. But this one, I didn't have a seat. They didn't give me enough room to work. Yeah, well, the other one tried to murder the vice president when they didn't get their way and forged electoral college certificates. Fact check. What about that? Fact check. These certificates aren't real. Fact check. That's a federal offense. Fact check. You should all be arrested. Well, we don't know who did exactly. They said it was provisional. In Pennsylvania, they figured out how to write that it was provisional. None of the other states did. So, fact check. They weren't provisional. They claimed they were. But fact check, Pennsylvania figured it out and nobody else did. Fact check, that's it. You're under arrest. All of you. All of you. You're not having a convention. You don't get to hold your version of events up against this other version of events. The version of events that's certified, that's the one. The version of events that got forged, you're in jail. I don't know why we're still doing this. Okay, I didn't really mean to spend that much time on it just to give you the idea of the dates, but it reminded me that they really suck. So, okay, I'm glad I had the opportunity to do that for you. Speaking of violation of federal statutes, let's just throw this one into the mix here. Maybe there's time for 2 stories, possibly just one. Might get carried away with this story. This one is from the New Republic. We've already been visiting at the New Republic. But they have a different angle on things. Hey, you think you're going to trigger the Insurrection Act, which hasn't been used for quite some time, in order to overthrow the government at some point? Let's talk about other old statutes that haven't been brought up for a while. No one's been tried under the Alien and Sedition Acts for some time, right? But now we actually have people in jail for having violated the Sedition Act in 2021, just as I described to you that they did. Here's another one that hasn't been used for a long time, the Logan Act. Do you remember that it even exists? It comes up from time to time, and this time it's once again Trump who's violating it. Trump's latest scheme to beat Harris may have crossed legal lines, says the TNR's Ellie Quinlan. Hoteling? Houghtailing? Houghtailing. I think we did this before with her name. Sorry, I really should work on that one, but yeah, I'm going to forget all about it in a minute. Trump's latest scheme to beat Harris, what is it? Well, we know this. It may have crossed legal lines. Donald Trump is reportedly advising Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, maybe you've heard of him, which would be a violation of the Logan Act. What do you mean? Well, here's how it goes. He may not be in office, but Donald Trump has been speaking with the powers that be about Israel's war on Gaza, but it's not in an effort to end the genocide. Like you might think, what's wrong with that? We should definitely be talking to any of the parties to this insanity and trying to put an end to it. Instead, Trump has allegedly been talking with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to avert a ceasefire deal, fearing that doing so, that is to having a ceasefire deal, could help Vice President Kamala Harris win in November, according to PBS. Well, we can't have that. Can't stop the murder to help Harris. Better that people still continue to die. The reporting is that former President Trump is on the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel, urging him not to cut a deal right now because it's believed that that would help the Harris campaign, said PBS's Judy Woodruff Monday night. So I don't know who knows whether that will come about or not, but I have to think that the Harris campaign would like for President Biden to do what presidents do, and that's to work on that one. It wasn't immediately clear if Woodruff was referring to a new report or an Axios story from last week that cited 2 U.S. sources as claiming that Trump and Netanyahu had spoken on the phone about ceasefire and Gaza hostage talks. Netanyahu's office and Trump both separately denied the report because they probably have been advised, yeah, it's against the law. I did encourage him to get this over with. You want to get it over with fast. Have victory. Get your victory and get it over with. It has to stop. The killing has to stop, Trump said at a New Jersey press conference on Thursday, referring to their meeting at Mar-a-Lago last month. But he also criticized ceasefire demands. So interestingly, he throws in a line at the end. Yeah. Stop the killing. Right. But we want to get this over with by killing everybody so that we can then stop the killing. Once they're all dead, well, you can stop. During Biden's speech at the Democratic National Convention on Monday, the president promised that his administration is working around the clock to bring humanitarian assistance into Gaza, peace and security to the Middle East, and deliver a ceasefire and an end to the war. The president, the one who's actually president right now, also nodded to the more than 3,500 protesters who took to the streets in Chicago on Monday, demanding an immediate ceasefire to the war, claiming the demonstrators have a point. The war has killed more than 40,000 Palestinians since it began 10 months ago. Palestinian poet Mossab Abu Toha, who escaped the besieged country in December, reported on Monday that the humanitarian area in South Gaza is a little more than 14 square miles, and crammed into it are more than 1.8 million people. with no water, no electricity, no food, no clinics, no pharmacies, no shelters, he wrote, lamenting in a separate post that he cannot understand how this government continues to fund the genocide, but cannot put an end to it and, quote, force the aggressors to stop dropping bombs, unquote. Well, obviously point well taken, and area of great interest. Hasn't had as much attention because of the hype surrounding domestic politics, but definitely a part of the scene at the DNC. But yeah, the issue here is, and I guess they're just not really describing it very much, but the Logan Act, like going all the way back to the late 18th century, that basically is the acknowledgement, look, there is one president and one presidential administration at a time. Doesn't matter whether you think you're going to succeed to it or that you once held it, but you cannot, as non-president, attempt to conduct foreign affairs and diplomatic policy as though you were president, even if you think you're going to become president, certainly not without the permission of the current administration. Perhaps during a transition period, yes, you could meet with diplomatic figures, but you're not supposed to be doing that, and you're certainly not supposed to be rigging things such that they will inure to your electoral benefit. Of course, we've seen it before with the hostage crisis in Iran, and it's the chief most reported aspect of the Logan Act is that no one has ever been convicted under it, and it's been about 100 years since anybody was even indicted under it. A bit of a long shot and a bit of a dead letter, but if you think you can invoke the Insurrection Act, or I guess for that matter, if you think you can erase things from the 14th Amendment, well then the age of the law doesn't seem to bother you. It's good. Supreme Court goes back and forth on that one, whether they like the old stuff or the new stuff. Anyway, we got one of the two stories I had thought about cramming into the end of today's show in Under the Wire. Not even really Under the Wire. We're already eating into Justice Putnam's time for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes next.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning
with David Waldman.
So here's his take on the convention happenings. Kamala Harris has a resume. Donald Trump has a rap sheet. What else has he got in store for you? Over 13,000 complaints of tenant harassment in Los Angeles has led to only 4 fines in the last 3 years. I wonder whether there's a major political party behind that.